this new one I feel like flows the way an album maybe not should be, but the way we wanted it to, and kind of shake a little bit of rust off how we had the first one arranged, you know?
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Vincent Van Dell.
Vincent, what band do you play for? And how would you describe the music of that band?
Right now it's Witch Vomit, and we play a old school inspired death metal. I would say mainly throughout the years inspired by bands like Bolt Thrower, Incantation, Grave for sure. And then we take a lot of influences just from other, separate releases of bands, like Gorefest demos, Dissection, Infester, just kind of a lot of different death metal influences and a little bit of black metal too.
It sounds like there's a specific era of death metal that you're most interested in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for the most part, early 90s stuff, like getting into, you know, Carcass, Symphonies of Sickness and stuff. And those first Grave albums were like big influences on making the music in the first place. Impetigo, Ultimo Mondo Cannibale, Horror of the Zombies were huge, and, just inspiring, Tony and I to start the band and kind of go for a horror, old school sort of death metal vibe.
I'm curious, because that's basically the era that I came from. What
Totally.
I don't know much about you, but I'm assuming you're a bit younger than me.
Yes.
What attracted you to that sound? What did you like about those bands that you mentioned?
I think what it was in the beginning, if we're talking personally, I'm going to say it started a lot with the artwork and the horror movie aspect, and just getting into a lot of different movies in the town I'm from, Portland, Oregon. It's the same with Tony, who writes the majority of the music, the vocalist. And, I was just watching a lot of horror movies back in middle school and getting into some of the local metal scene here. And it just kind of led me down this path of getting into more extreme stuff and finding out, like how I can track down artists of these like, movie covers or metal covers that I was seeing. And, a lot of the beginning was getting into, like bands like Impetigo, Autopsy, Repulsion, and just, I guess, sticking to the more like kind of grinding death metal, kind of just pushing stuff to the limits was what really attracted me.
You mentioned the local scene in Portland. Were there any local bands that you were particularly close to or particularly inspired by?
Oh, I would say like to get started with music, I mean, there was a band called Engorged from here that was always super fun to see. They used like horror samples. They played, kind of a death thrash sound, but also had inspirations from like Carcass and, Impetigo as well. And then, over the years, like, just going to shows and meeting more people, Hellshock, the people from Blackwater Records were big, just like getting into playing shows. And then, of course, just, watching other bands from around here, I guess earlier on, Ritual Necromancy, Neltro, and then just forming friendships with people that we then, would play a bunch of shows with. Torture Axe, Sempiternal Dusk. And then just been here the whole time, I guess, since around that era, starting with playing shows with Witch Vomit in 2012. Yeah.
How did you meet Tony, and what made you guys decide to put Witch Vomit together?
We actually met through high school, and we were both into metal. And we had a similar friends group, and we were into punk. And back then, I mean, you could still just like walk to punk shows and walk to metal shows and buy records. And, we had a mutual friend that I had played some music with, and I was playing in a punk band at a pretty young age. Actually, I guess we met in middle school, but we didn't start jamming until high school. But we definitely like got each other into extreme music at a young age, and then high school was when we kind of reconnected, and I was into a lot of different grind stuff, and, he was into stuff like Deicide, more like Death, Morbid Angel. And I'd already known, Morbid Angel, but I guess was a little more into like some of the local grind stuff. And we started jamming and kind of went back and forth. Like we both played guitar, and we both played drums, maybe even him more so at the time. And then he just ended up being a stellar guitar player. And I was like, okay, well, we can't both play guitar if we're going to try to like move this forward. So this is now high school, past, years after we initially met. So then I just started playing drums, and he would kind of tell me a little bit about like how he would play some of the parts. And I'd only played drums in like one punk band, and he just started writing death metal riffs, and we were like, okay, let's go for something like Grave and Bolt Thrower and Nihilist. And we, learned a Nihilist cover. We started, playing with a lot of Death Doom stuff. And then we ended up just getting, I think, maybe about a 5-song set, and we played a house show. And that was our first show. And it was just a 2-piece. So we just wanted to kind of get it going and see how it felt.
So you started off as a 2-piece, and you recorded those.
Yeah.
Most of the early recordings as a 2-piece, right?
We actually had a bass player on the rehearsal, and we had already played 1 show as a 2-piece. We played, I think, 2 shows with that bass player, and then stuff wasn't quite working out. Tony and I were just practicing way more together, and we're like, let's just play some more shows and just do it us, since we're already writing new stuff. And we weren't just really linking up with that person at the time. So we actually only did shows as a 2-piece, and then Jason started playing bass for us in, I think, 2014, and has done everything from the Webs of Horror EP up until now, Funeral Sanctum. So he's been with us just the whole time through the studio and the majority of our live shows, except for just a couple.
Okay. So it wasn't that necessarily you guys wanted to stay as a 2-piece, it's just that you had problems finding a bass player to work with?
Yeah, I think we were anxious to get going, and we jammed all the time. I mean, we would just keep coming up with ideas, writing music, listening to music, and shows were just starting to begin to blow up more so, like, I guess not compared to now, but then there were different fests happening, and there were just a lot more metal happening. So we were like, well, if we get asked to play a show, let's just do it. So some of the notable shows we did as a 2-piece were PLF we played with at an old Blackwater Records location. We played the first Famine Fest, which had like Impaled and Rude, which was, one of our favorites of the kind of old school death metal back then, 2014. There's a band, Chronic Tomb, that played, that would then be people that did Cruraphragium, and then, Cerebral Rot, among other bands that they've been in. So it was just a cool time that stuff was happening. So we just were like, let's just keep playing as a 2-piece. Tony had just joined Torture Act, so we just kind of wanted to keep up with it, I guess, and kind of not slack, because we just had so much drive and so many ideas to work with.
And before Buried Deep, you guys added a second guitar player, right?
Yeah, before, are you saying after Scream from the Tomb Below, for Buried Deep? Yeah.
When did you add a second guitar player?
Oh, sorry.
Maybe that would be a better question.
Okay, yeah. So we got Casey, it would be right after the Poison Blood record came out. She started learning songs from that and older songs and stuff. And we started working up a new set. I think that was like 2017. And the first show we did with her was in Tacoma. And, Tony's always just like written a lot of like good music and good songs. And we just never had a chance to work with a second guitar player, and he had another guitar player in Torture Act, and they sounded, super fucking heavy. And I think like it got to a point where we wanted to make sure we could sound heavy anywhere we played and have different influences. So I think, adding her 2017, it really helped kind of form a different sound for that Buried Deep record, where we could add more melody and different guitar parts, and just kind of got to see where our writing went with that. Maybe less riff trains. Like, we would write a lot of riffs, and have always loved just having riff after riff. And that one kind of was able to make us sculpt kind of, I guess, more fluid songs and just try something new out, Yeah.
When you guys write songs, I mean, I'm assuming in the beginning it was you and Tony together in a rehearsal space. Would that be an accurate description?
Yeah, I would say so. I think he definitely does a lot of his writing at home, and will sometimes send me stuff, or we'll have like a whole song, or, fractions of a song that he can just bring to a rehearsal. And early on, it was like a lot of just riffs and a lot of different ideas that we would just kind of do together. And I think the majority of the time with writing, it would be him and I would get a song down for the most part. And then Jason would come, bass player, and we would be like, all right, check this out, and have a whole song. And then that made it easy to just be like, this is what it is. It's kind of like the outline. Now we'll start teaching it to you. And if you have any other, things that you think about and want to add, go from there. So a lot of it, I guess, Tony would come to practice. I mean, even now with this one, it was all just having a ton of ideas, bringing them to practice, and then him and I kind of practicing them out. I guess in these later-ish years, there'd be times where him and Casey would both know it and then bring it in, and then I could hear it, and then he would send it to me maybe or record the jam, and then I could kind of lock that in at home and then come back and then be like, all right, we figured it out, Yeah, he definitely does a lot of writing at home, and it makes it fun because him and I can jam all the time, and then show the rest of the band if we want and do it that way. And that can be super productive if people are busy or if we just want to, try to be productive and get a lot of shit done.
So are Tony and Casey handling most of the arrangements themselves, or do they just bring riffs in and you guys work out the arrangements as a trio?
I would say they come in with a pretty good idea of the way the song should be, or maybe Tony, and we'll kind of get a rhythm down, like him and I, and then Jason will learn it, and then we'll all practice it. And, if they want to add a second guitar part, then we'll have all that rhythm down. And then I think more so then they'll go home with that. Casey and Tony can then figure out, a second part or a melody or something to then bring back. But yeah, I would say unless it's him and I nailing it and then showing them, it would be him and I jamming it and then, just showing both of them at the same time or something.
Okay. Now you play guitar too. Do you come up with any riffs in it or any songs? Yeah,
actually, I want to say this new record is the only record I didn't have a riff in, but the first from the rehearsal and on, I had at least one riff, and that always just kind of came from me having played guitar longer technically than I had played drums, and we were still kind of in a lot of brainstorming, kind of building block way of getting the band going or just having different sounds for each record. So I always kind of felt like it was fun to think of something myself and see what Tony thought of it, or see where my idea might put us outside the box if, he had a structure he liked. And then I thought, oh, cool, well, let me think something and we'll see if I can switch it up. And then I'll already know what I want to do for drums, So I guess just like a riff and album, except this last one, that was all, pretty much him.
about your drumming a little bit.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts of Buried Deep was your ride work. Does that come from Reifert?
It's funny. It does a lot. There's this specifically, this, I forget which track, but it's on Autopsy's Fiend for Blood. And I think the production on that one's just grimy and awesome. And you can just tell he's just like attacking the ride and just letting it kind of ring, or the bell is going. And I think that a lot of my blasts on that, especially in the title track, Buried Deep, at the end, it's just totally that Autopsy sort of 1 foot, like aggressive blast. So yeah, I would say there is a lot of Reifert in there.
Do you have a specific ride that you like? A specific brand?
Honestly, right now, no. I've had a lot of the same stuff for a lot of years and kind of just switch it out when it seems convenient. And a lot of the time I'll just practice on what me or either Seth, who I share a jam space with, he'll have at the time. So no.
Okay. Besides Reifert, are there any other drummers that you took inspiration from, or that you look up to?
I would say getting into drumming. I mean, Flo Monier, I love his drumming for those first couple Cryptopsy records.
Yeah.
I just feel like that really pushed stuff to the limit and has that tight but loose vibe. And I've always been inspired by, like, yeah, it's brutal and it's fast, but there's this no bullshit aggression to it and to the style where he just kind of does what he wants. And I would say that was a big influence getting into drumming myself. And then Jim Rowe, of some of those early incantations, I love that drumming. I think it's awesome. There's a lot of good fill work in there. You can listen to Onward to Golgotha and just only listen to the drums, and that is super fun to follow and try to, read how he gets some of that fill work done. But yeah, I would say, yeah, Reifert, Jim Rowe, Flo Monier, kind of the main three. Fenriz on Soulside Journey in specific, I think is huge. Like, that's one of, his best performances. It just like uses the whole kit and it's clean and it sounds awesome and super metal sounding, So that was one that I listened to quite a bit back then, getting into it,
Yeah. And Fenriz was super inspired by Autopsy on that first Dark Throne album especially.
Yeah, definitely. Even in, some riffing, there's some cool bass parts that remind me just of, really Autopsy for sure. Some of those kind of like punk kind of thrash beats too. Yeah, I would say I agree.
So the third Witch Vomit album is called Funeral Sanctum.
Yes.
And at the time we're having this conversation, it will be released at the end of the week through 20 Buck Spin.
Yeah.
When did you guys start working on this album? Or when did Tony and Casey come to you with the songs for this album?
Let's see. I would say we had this one down, like, it's the second song on side B. And I would say that was probably the first one, and it had probably been shortly after the European tour 2022. It'll be called Dominion of a Darkened Realm. And that, I think, was the first one we were working with. And it actually had like a lot of Autopsy mid-pace stuff, a bit of like Demigod, and like the intro kind of drum part. I took just inspiration from like bands like Bestial Warlust, just kind of like trying to attack you to start the song with just drumming. And I would say, yeah, just probably fall of 2022, I think. And then Tony and I just kind of, worked on a few songs. We had some other stuff going on. We were still playing shows with our other bands and stuff. And we started getting like 1 to 3 songs down. And then the writing took off. I'd say probably maybe just like a year ago, we tried to really sort of pick up the pace on it and stuff. But yeah, just about a couple years ago from today was when he showed me the first couple riffs.
You described some of the the earlier Witch Vomit songs as riff trains.
Uh-huh.
Comparatively, how would you compare the songwriting to those early albums?
I think that on some of those early albums, there are actually a lot of, well, I would say on the first record, there's actually a lot of similarities to this one. And the riff train thing, I think, was also really inspired by how Soulside Journey, Dark Throne, is. There's just a lot of riff after riff after riff. And I think that there are a few of those instances on this new record. I just feel like one of the biggest differences actually is more so just the production and the way the songs fit together on this one. I think that the first record had a lot of riff train stuff, and it was kind of song after song, maybe only a couple like cohesive transfers. And this new one, I feel like, flows the way an album maybe not should be, but the way we wanted it to, and kind of shake a little bit of rust off how we had the first one arranged.
It does seem like there's a lot more harmonizing between the guitars on this one.
Yeah,
I don't know if you agree with that.
I would agree. Yeah, I feel like the third song on this new record has a kind of just this mid pace. It kind of reminds me of Heartwork in a way, but it's kind of mid pace and it has a lot of more harmony, and I guess lets some of the song and the riffs breathe a little more.
It reminds me of this old Swedish band called Eucharist. I don't know if you ever heard those guys.
Actually, Tony had shown me them at one point. I vaguely checked them out, but he did say that was an inspiration.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, no, totally. Like, he brought them up actually during the writing process, sent me the album, was like, oh, if you like, first at the gates, you should check this out. It's a little bit different, but, it has some similarities. And I totally think that now going back and listening to that I had only checked it out and the record was recorded. I went back and checked it out. I was like, oh, okay, this is totally where I got a lot of this, with maybe ideas for the production sound too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about that production. Where did you guys end up going to record this?
So we went to Evan Mirsky, also known as Mouse, in Portland, Oregon. The studio he runs out of his Red Lantern Studios. We've been there since Webs of Horror, except for we did one single somewhere else in Portland. And this will now be, if there was Webs, Scream. I think this is our sixth time as Witch Vomit with them, or with him. So
okay.
We went there, and since we've worked together now for 10 years, we could really kind of go back through the discography, think about things we liked, things we maybe not didn't like, but don't want to hear in this one, or make some of the same mistakes, or not even mistakes, just things to focus better on. Like, I really wanted, the bass drum to punch through and be way more prominent and kind of drive more than I think some of the other records did. And I feel like the last record, as much as I liked it, Abhorrent Rapture, lacked a little bit of the bass drum. So we were just trying to look for like a little more just clean guitar sound, louder bass in general, bass drums. I think we showed him Considered Dead by Gorguts as an example of kind of how to, we want something heavy, we want to hear the riffs, and we want it, to be bassy. And then I think out of that, just through the songwriting, we got a little mix of like a heavier death metal record, and then a little more of, a record like Storm of the Lightsbane or Somberlane, just by the way the songwriting worked.
Right. You mentioned you've been working with Mouse since the Webs of Horror EP, and as you mentioned, over 10 years.
Yeah.
Why does the relationship work so well? What do you like about working with Mouse?
I think, we had met him, both Tony and I, through punk shows in town. He is slightly older than us, but still on the younger side, when we were out going to shows at that age. And we just had this good vibe with him where he is very driven in his recording, but he doesn't have a bias, or I would hate to say, but like an ego toward a certain genre or a social media presence for that matter. So he's recording all this different music from Portland and the area, punk, crust, death metal, black metal. So many people were going to him when he started recording there. And it made it easier to not have one-sided opinions or have I guess different intentions that not saying different engineers nowadays or newer-ish ones are doing, but a lot of them are metal focused or something like that, and there's a reason they want to do it, to record a style of music. And he just does a lot of different stuff that is underground, and he will give you feedback. He'll, like I said, he wants you to show him records like that he wants it, that we would want it to sound like. He also was doing reel to reel for those first couple releases we did with him. And then, then we started doing digital, but we got to kind of work together and then grow a bit together, and kind of, it just felt comfortable. And yeah, it just really worked for being able to spit ideas. Never seemed anxious at all when we were wanted to hang out and get as much as we wanted out of the day. Just always seemed to accommodate to our needs and make it worthwhile. So yeah, I think it was during COVID when we were writing Abhorrent Rapture and stuff just wasn't open. And, I remember Tony saying something like, man, I don't know what Mouse is doing right now, but we should try to fly him here and record with him. I just think we hadn't had contact with him. And, he just made this thing it's got to be Mouse, when we come out back with stuff, when we can release stuff and play shows again, we got to do this post-COVID thing with Mouse, and I think it mainly was, the friendship, and just so easy to work with. And he'd worked with other friends and our other bands,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Would you say Mouse is a big part of Witch Vomit sound?
Definitely. I would say so. There's, now that we've gone this far, it would maybe not worry me, but it would definitely change our sound, or at least how we went about the next recording, or if we had to record without him. I feel like we would just need to take a lot that we learned from him, and because we would want to make it still match the style. And if I could choose, I want everything that we do with this band to be with him, just because he does have really good work, but you can also hear a lot of atmosphere, and you can hear the room, it doesn't just sound compressed, it just doesn't sound fake, but it sounds clean and great. So yeah, I want to keep working with him for sure. I'm super happy that we've stuck with him, and I don't think Witch Vomit would be Witch Vomit without that whole growth all together and us working with him. And yeah, I think that it was a huge thing for our sound.
That's great. Do you want to say anything about the gentleman who mastered the album?
I think that would be a question for Tony.
Well, okay, so I'll say Dan Lowndes from Necrometamorphosis mastered the album.
Oh yeah. I mean, totally. I feel like I knew that. I do like his stuff, and I do like Necrometamorphosis. Yeah. But yes, keep talking.
No worries. Did he get involved through Mouse? Was he somebody that Mouse likes to work with, or did he come through the label?
Oh gosh, I think that could have been something where we had worked with someone, and then Tony just wanted to, through friends and people, wanted to use him this time. Yeah, I think that was mainly Tony's idea, because we've had a few different people that have mastered our stuff over the years, actually. So that, I would say, we switched up. We had Damien from Horrendous. We had Dan Randall do from Mammoth Sound. And then I think, this one, Tony just wanted to do him. I think he just liked his stuff better and had been recommended him a lot.
So by the time people hear this episode, the album will be out, and I believe you guys will be going on a U.S. tour. Do you want to say anything about that tour?
Yeah, it is going to be, pretty much supporting the new record, but we're going to be playing a good amount of, older songs. We're going to play in cities we haven't played before, Albuquerque. We've never played in Texas. We have 3 shows in Texas. It'll be cool because we've played a lot of bigger cities or places in different countries, but not really traveled through just smaller cities that you just don't hear about as much. And I'm excited to see how the turnouts are with that. And we're going with Bobophilic for, I want to say, like the first 7 shows. Then we'll be playing a couple shows with Mortuous. So we've played shows with them in the past, are friends. And then finishing off some shows with Mortal Wound. I think it's going to be a really good tour and a really good time for a lot of people to get out, because there's a lot of other tours happening around that time and a lot of death metal shows. And I think it'll just be a really big spring leading into summer with a lot of underground bands. And luckily we get to cross paths with, a good chunk of them that, some we've known for a while and then some we haven't met yet before, but have had friends that toured with them or played with them that we're excited to meet and be able to, become friends with and stuff. And yeah, I think it's just a long time coming for us to actually support a release with a tour, because we just haven't really done it that way. for whatever reason, we've been busy in the past. We've had other things going on, but we've always played, what we thought were standout shows if we traveled, and always wrote a lot of music. So I think that's a little bit of the difference is we didn't start the band being like, oh, let's push this new record or that. Let's keep writing and keep writing. So for this tour coming up, we actually get to promote that record, sell the merch from that record, and talk about it. And it'll be something that's happening now. And I think that's cool, and something we haven't really gotten to be a part of with this band is, it's going to come out in a couple of days, and then 2 weeks later, we're going to be hanging out with people that are listening to it. So we get to hear their response, and I think that'll be really cool.
So by the time people hear this episode, Funeral Sanctum will be out through 20 Buck Spin. Vincent?
Yeah.
Can you tell all the listeners how they can order the album? What's the best way to get it?
I would just say through the 20 Buck Spin website right now is going to be the best way to just order it, or come to our shows on our tour starting April 19th.
And do you want to say anything about the vinyl versions that 20 Buck Spin is putting out for this album?
Oh, shoot. I forget all the variants, but I know there's a few and they look rad. So you're going to have to check on them.
And people can just go to the...
Yeah.
Yeah, people can just go to the 20 Buck Spin web store and see all the variants.
Exactly. You can go through there and sift through them and everything.
Hopefully they'll still be available by the time this episode is out. But will you guys have some on tour?
We will. We will have some of the records, the CDs, I think the cassettes as well. We're going to have some shirts, full color print. They look great. Pirate pressed those. You can also order our shirts on the 20 Buck Spin website. And then you can also get a lot of those links, ticket links and stuff through the Witch Vomit Instagram right now. Follow us. You'll be able to watch our stories and click any ticket links that we have provided for the tour. And then you'll get links to the labels and everything to be able to order the record.
Very cool. And if people want to follow Witch Vomit online, what's the best way to do that?
I would say through the Witch Vomit Instagram or just through 20 Buck Spin. We'll definitely hit you with some more personal news, but he'll always have updates from the label as well.
So it looks like I'll be in the Pacific Northwest this May for Northwest Terror Fest, and hopefully if all goes well, I'll take a bus trip to Portland.
Yeah.
What are good things to check out in Portland? I heard about a taco place that has metal shows.
Taco place that has metal shows? Shoot. Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think of that.
Mono Culto?
Oh, that is a venue. I actually haven't been to a show there yet. But it also used to be an old venue called The Twilight, and Witch Vomit played some shows there. But I would say to check out, if we're talking things along punk and metal, Blackwater Records, City Noise Records, Second Avenue Records, Little Axe Records are great. Movie Madness is awesome if you want to take a look at some, cool stuff, some niche shit, horror movies and memorabilia and shit like that. And then there's a great outdoor scene really nearby, so you'll be able to do a lot of cool stuff, go on hikes and everything, and it's a good place to be around this time. Spring will have sprung. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah
Vincent, is there anything else you want to say about the album or anything else?
I guess mainly just the people that have been with us since the beginning, through Head Split Records putting shit out, Memento Mori and 20 Buck Spin, and I'm just stoked to see what people think of this record and see what they think of it in contrast to some of our older material. So I think this will be a really cool one to hear feedback from. A lot of people might think, based on some of the art direction or preview tracks, that there's this different vibe happening, but I think that it sounds like Witch Vomit, and I think that it's just maybe a different dialed in production. And I'm excited to see what fans of everything we've put out might see, how that statement, proves itself. And I'm just kind of excited to see the response for this one. So I think I'll just finish with that. I'm excited to know if people like it and think that it sounds like Witch Vomit. We put a lot of work into it, so it's going to be a cool one.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vincent.
Definitely. Thank you so much.